Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
We're married, we make movies, and we believe that anyone in any circumstance can make a feature film.
Welcome to the Feature Filmmaker Podcast. If you want a career making movies, you're in the right place.
Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in.
Hi everyone, welcome this week to the podcast. Today we're going to do an episode a little bit to teach briefly about the concept of four-walling, which is like one small facet of self-distribution. It's an optional facet, but let's get into what that means and why it's so valuable to understand some of these principles of self-distribution. So I think before I get into that, I want to talk about some perspectives that I've started to learn and that I've been reading. We're going to go back, we're going to touch back on a lot of the education right now that we're getting through the podcast and literature that is authored by Alex Ferrari at the Indie Film Hustle podcast and his book, Rise of the Filmpreneur. So once again, I'd recommend all of that learning, but you can use this podcast episode as a touching kind of a springboard into that material. And there's one key concept that if you get nothing else out of, I think it's really valuable. It's something I wish I'd known before making my first feature film. And it's the most basic concept. It sounds super dumb when you say it, but I don't think 98% of filmmakers are doing it when they set out to make a project. And it's this one key fact, and it sounds ridiculous, but I really think that a large chunk of money for whatever amount of money you're raising, whether it's your own money or somebody else's, for your first feature or any feature film, should be set aside for marketing. And that's going to deal with four-walling a little bit, but this principle sounds so basic and obvious, and yet almost nobody in the indie film world is doing it. No one. The typical story is that if we're lucky, we've set money aside for post-production, right? Like, we actually had enough money to finish the edit and color and sound and score. Maybe VFX, if there are any, which hopefully there aren't much, if any.
It's like because it's the end of the line. If you're going to run out of money, it's by the end of the line, you've done it. And so I think that even if you have set aside in your budget some money for that purpose, something else comes up and it seems more important or urgent or necessary, and so it's frequently the case that you'll end up out of money at this point. I also think that potentially people don't know how to spend that money. Like, what does it mean to market? How much does it cost? How do I budget for it? Because I don't even know what that is. Like, is that putting it in festivals? Is that like, I think if we don't know what that is, it's unlikely that we'll know how to set aside money for it or do it.
Yeah, and it's like all of the above, right? I mean, what is marketing? Festivals, check. Social media ads, check. Creating a website, creating posters. If you need to set money aside for trailers, if you're not doing all that yourself, that's marketing money. Taking time or putting money behind traditional marketing, billboards, going to conventions. There's a ton of ideas, and he goes over this a lot in Filmpreneur, Rise of the Filmpreneur. But it's no different than any other business, right? There's a million different ways to market, and there's a million different places to try and put your movie so that people get eyes on it and become aware of it, specifically the people that you think are the best fit as an audience for your film. But I want to touch on what you just said, Anna. Like, it's the end of the line. Typically, we run out of money there. I mean, that goes back to another thing that most of us don't do, which is actually budget contingency. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be eating our post-production budget during production if we have a production contingency budget. And if we also have contingency for post-production, we shouldn't be eating into that either. Now, some of us, you might be hearing this and thinking, oh, well, that'd be nice, but, I'm just barely scraping enough money just to, I don't have any money for contingency. Mm-hmm. Well, contingency is 10% of whatever it is you do have. It's all proportional. So if you only have $700 for production on your movie, $70 is contingency, right? So you're really only going to make it for $630. Now, you might think that sounds like an absurdly cheap amount of money, but I mean, the Polish brothers made a movie, black and white, shot on a DSLR in France with two actors, and both of them were basically volunteers. One of them was Mark Polish, and they made the movie for no They had a scriptment, they didn't have a script, and they had no overhead costs at all. There was no costuming, there was no anything. They literally just made it. Now, I'm not saying that that's why you have to make movies. I'm just saying if all you have is $700, you can make it. If you have 7,000, if you have 70,000, if you have 700,000, if you have 7 million, right? We can just keep adding zeros. At some point, you're going to say this isn't enough. They only made A Quiet Place, which was a small film, for 10 million. That's 7 million is not enough. And it's enough. You have enough, whatever it is. Pull your resources together, whether they're yours or you get some equity financing. I'm a big believer in equity financing. I believe all of us have contacts with enough work we can raise that money. Set money aside, make sure there's contingency so you don't run out, and then set aside as much for marketing as you can. Minimum 20%. I would recommend doing double your budget. So set $50,000 aside. If you're able to raise $100,000, set $50,000 aside from the beginning.
So half
the budget for marketing. And here's why. It's obvious, because you'll have money to market your film. But it also goes farther than that. It goes into most of our plan for how to make money on our feature films. And it's not just making money. We all make these movies to be seen, and no one's going to see it if it gets done and it just disappears, which is what happens to a lot of our films. They don't sell, they're not successful, they don't make profit at the box office. Even if you get lucky and you do sell it to a distributor, sometimes those distributors do nothing to distribute the movie itself. And then not only do you not make money, but no one sees it. And that's not why we are making these things, is so that they can just kind of be a drop in the bucket that disappears into the mass of indie films that are being made today.
Yeah, so I think that's the simple definition of marketing, is anything that helps people know that your movie exists.
Yeah.
That's what marketing is. But what about organic marketing? Just sharing the word in ways that are free on Facebook groups, on, your networks. Like, is that an option as well?
Well, of course it is. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have money to market, but I would still set aside money to market and supplement that with as much powerful organic marketing as you possibly can. And part of that, I think, is sharing the process of making your film, sharing details about it without spoiling it as much as you possibly can throughout the entire process. And as you do that, you will slowly grow your audience. And then even if you do have money for marketing when your movie's done, you'll have slowly already been marketing organically the whole time. And there's lots and lots of ways to organically market, but I still recommend having budget for it. And the main reason is because even if we can only raise, let's say you only raise 10 grand for marketing, that sounds like a pretty measly amount when you think of but if Sony were to distribute my movie, how much would they put behind marketing? The sad truth is that unless your movie has a huge name actor in it, they're probably only going to put a few $1,000 behind the marketing, right? Like, they're going to see if it sticks or if there's any momentum behind it. And if it doesn't seem like it's taking off, often it kind of just fizzles out, and they won't fight for your movie the same way you will. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I really do think there are still some good distributors and good distribution deals that can happen, but are going for a traditional distribution sale of the movie. We just want to do a one and done, sell it, and we're done. At least principal American distribution. That's a great plan. Okay, let's hope we leverage that to the best it can give us. But if we have marketing set aside, a budget for it, then you're in a position to actually walk into the meeting without feeling any need whatsoever to make a sale. Like, you don't have to sell the movie because you have a whole plan in place to market it yourself, all by yourself, and you're confident that you know who your audience is and that you can reach them. And so that's a big thing, to be able to walk in, and that will actually increase your ability to do it maybe the more traditional way of selling it to distributors and making a profit for your investors in a big sale. And if not, once again, you're prepared. You're completely prepared. And so to me, it's just obvious good business. Like, no one would go into like product development unless they said, how are we going to bring this thing to market? Like, do we have a plan, you know? And in worst case scenario, you could raise some marketing money on the back end, like Mark Twyla did with, I mean, he had money set aside too, but he didn't even use it. He ran an Indiegogo campaign for his movie Monsters of Man, or Monsters of Men. Anyway, a robot movie that he made, and he raised a big chunk of cash on Indiegogo, basically pre-selling licenses to his film to rent it, and he raised like $25,000, I think is what he said, and they used that for their Facebook ad spend so they could split test the trailer, and that goes a long way on a release on an indie film. And that movie went on to make millions. I'm sure he spent way more than that in the long run, but in their initial release they used $25,000 to get the trailer in front of 50 million people, you know? So these are all just anecdotal things. But to get into the idea of four-walling is when you use that marketing money to self-fund a theatrical distribution. And that could mean one premiere screening at your local movie theater, or it could mean several showings at your local movie theater on multiple screens or multiple nights on one screen or whatever. Or it could mean that you're actually showing it on several screens using some sort of a on-demand screening method where you're reaching out to people and seeing if they can garner enough interest. If they break a threshold, whatever, 120 people in Chicago said that they would like to see the movie. Well, that broke the threshold for booking a screening, and they've all purchased tickets. Therefore, the screening is now happening, and they all go and watch it. But if it's too low, then it doesn't justify the cost of the screen, right? So you don't do it because you'd be upside down. I think that I want to talk about four-walling just because it's an interesting approach to being able to risk-free distribute your movie in a way that lets you have access to, they buy a ticket, they give you their email address. Now you have the email addresses of everyone who watches the movie in a theatrical setting, and then you can later market, hey, here's the DVD or the Blu-ray or the digital release, or here's some news about it, and you can share this on social. And that's just like good access to your audience and a good way to continue to market. And you're actually making money with your movie in a theatrical setting, which is kind of a dream for most of us as filmmakers, I think, to think, wow, we're actually going to put the movie up on a big giant screen.
Now, are you renting the theater and putting it up, or is this actually working with the theater to list it and have the showtimes and people can buy tickets through the theater's platform?
So I think what we're doing is you're basically renting the theater. One way you do it is you basically rent the theater and you just drive traffic straight there. And the advantage of that is that if you're driving traffic through your own platform, you get their email addresses. Mm-hmm. They're paying you. They're not paying technically the theater. The theater at that point, they don't care if you make your money back or not. You're paying the theater for the seats. They care that you fill up the seats as a bonus for them, right? Because then people are walking through the doors and buying overpriced popcorn and candy, right? But either way, they're covered for the cost. Now, by doing it strategically, you can say, if we are able to sell X number of tickets, well, then it makes more than it costs to rent said theater. Therefore, we will proceed. If it doesn't, we won't proceed. And hey, no skin off anyone's back, right?
So you say a date and have people purchase their tickets in advance
before us.
Before you actually reserve the theater for that date.
Yeah, and you've got to have enough advance so that, like, if it goes through, there's still time to get to book the theater.
It's not taken.
Yeah, yeah, and if it doesn't go through, the theater isn't, upset or whatever. So there's a system for that, and there are websites and services even that will help you to do that. But the point is that there are ways to do it and mitigate that risk, and so I think even if you break even, let's say it's a premiere, there's still advantages to screening, even if it doesn't make a lot of money, because let's say your main strategy is to distribute via transactional video on demand. They're just going to pay for it on Amazon for $5 to watch your movie on the computer, and and you're saying, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll fill up a theater. Maybe we break even. All the people in the theater, we encourage them to share it on social media. We shoot a bunch of, footage of everyone packing the theater and getting all excited and show reactions and do little interviews outside of the door and ask people for their impressions. And then you've got a ton of social media content for that traditional indie online distribution model, which you're doing as like a transactional video on demand approach. So either way, the screening is actually still really beneficial for your marketing strategy, even if it only breaks even. So for me, it's just something I've been pondering as something that's really valuable. It's valuable. It builds hype. It could actually make you a lot of money, and in some cases, you might even be able to show the movie in several cities across America if you're strategic about the movie and how you're reaching your audience online and how well you're able to target them in either grassroots or paid marketing, fill up theater seats. It's possible.
If you're marketing on Facebook, you could actually market to that particular city and limit the ads to people who are nearby, who'd be local to, and also to people who you think are the audience that would enjoy the film the most.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you were saying that, it made me think about the difference between applying, like submitting to film festivals versus just holding a screening yourself, and how that's almost the same as auditioning for small roles in films versus making something yourself.
Yeah, that's a good parallel.
Whereas like you could audition and hundreds of people audition for the same role, and a lot of times the competition is high and you may or may not get a role, and it may or may not be a role that you really like that much, even though you're getting paid if you get selected. Most people are spending time and not getting selected, right?
Yeah.
Of the 100 people who apply, 99 of them do not get selected. And so in the same way with the film festival, you're paying money to submit. It's competitive.
You might not get picked.
And then you don't make money off of it, even though it is still good marketing. You don't make ticket sales, the festival does. So it's interesting.
And most films that are even decent can get into festivals. They won't necessarily get into the best festivals, but I still think it's worth it. And I say that as a marketing thing because like you get laurels, and it just helps for trailers and posters and things. But you're right, that as a distribution planner is like a big, like, this is my break. You can audition all day, and it's such a slow grind, and you can submit to 1,000 festivals and get into 5. I'm not preaching doom and gloom. You'll actually probably get into a lot more than 5 because most festivals,
there's all different tiers.
There's
of
all
festivals.
tiers, and the low tier ones will take a lot of movies. Some are high competition and some aren't. Sundance, that's way high. Statistically, you're not probably going to get in, but there are a lot of festivals. You can get your movie no matter how bad it is into most festivals. And not getting into Sundance doesn't mean you have a bad movie, by the way. They have their own brand just like anybody else. But to quote Sebastian from La La Land, right, you should stop auditioning and you won't have to do all this pishikaka or whatever he says.
Well, he says, and make history. She's like, okay, I'll just make history.
Yeah, stop auditioning and you're a child prodigy playwright. It basically make something. I go back to this all the time. Make stuff, share stuff. That's just what all the great successful filmmakers in the world have done. They make stuff and they share stuff. And like you're saying, you could submit to a place where you could screen your film, or you could create an opportunity to screen your film. You can audition, or you can create the role and write it for yourself. You can lobby studios to make your movie and fund your movie and distribute your movie, or you can write your movie and create your movie and fund your movie. And I mean, maybe not with your own money, but you can go do it, and distribute your movie. You can do that too. If you don't like distribution that's being handed to you, then create the distribution you wish was handed to you. Look, I'd love to put my movie on Wheaties boxes and McDonald's toys and get like a massive merchandising deal and put it out there for millions of dollars. But frankly, I don't really have any movies that would justify that. I mainly want to reach people that will value the film and the story. And I value the film. I'm spending all this time, I'm just talking about the movie I'm making right now. I'm spending all this time making it. I don't want to just sell it to someone, even if they pay okay money, who's just going to like throw it on a shelf and watch it disappear. I don't think that would even do as much good, even if it takes more time and effort to get the same financial ROI. Mm-hmm. If I can reach more people and learn more. And that's been our MO, hasn't it? I mean, we even paid a company to help us make a pitch deck, and then we made it ourselves when we really were paying them to do it. And this was a professional company that did this for a lot of big movies. We did that because we wanted to be able to make pitch decks ourselves. And we've been told over and over again that our decks are some of the best anyone has ever seen. That knowledge was more valuable to us than them doing the job for us. And that's kind of been our MO, and that's kind of what we teach, why we created the Feature Filmmaker Academy, because we're like trying to equip people with really high class knowledge, super high value knowledge to be able to create the career and the filmmaking and the infrastructure that they wish people were giving them. And we all just keep walking around just wishing people would give us these opportunities. And it's kind of a silly way to live life. It's kind of an exhausting, disappointing way to live life and try and make a career in filmmaking. So that was a long way to get around to four-walling, but that's some context, and hopefully I've described the term. Four-walling is basically self-distribution through theatrical means, whether that's one screen or 1,000. It's really buying out the theater. That's what four-walling is.
No, it's definitely worth considering, especially because you can do pre-sales and not lose any money. You know, you can know if the theater's sold out before you pay them.
Yeah.
So it's smart.
Or you could go the Kickstarter method and just say, all right, theater, here's the money, and I got to fill up those seats. I mean, that makes sense, I think. In our case, for example, it's local. Let's say I did a local theater, and I said, all right, here's the day, here's the time, and I just put posters and you know, Facebook ads or billboards or whatever I had to do to like fill up the seats and kind of made it like a special local screening. But if I was going to try and reach across the United States, I would definitely not do that. I would just say kind of a grassroots screenings on demand sort of a thing, where it's like, if we break the threshold, we'll hold the screening.
Well, and big movies will do that too. La La Land did that too. They did limited release in a few cities, and then it performed well, so they released in a few more theaters, and they just grew as it performed well.
Not quite the same grassroots
obviously,
method,
at a different scale.
They had a testing phase, like you said. Like
a lot of movies will do that.
Yeah, that's very common. Yeah, this is more like, we'll only hold the screening if the tickets are already sold. But, I mean, like, even to your point, Star Wars, you know, they'll pre-sale so many tickets, and that might affect the number of screens that it plays on.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it's every
Even
available
right now,
screen in the United States, usually with movies that big. But
like Top Gun is still playing in some places
Oh,
where
yeah.
they're still selling, and so it's...
And you know, that's another thing I'm glad you mentioned, because Top Gun is a good example. I found a place, I'm really interested in World War II history and aviation history in Georgia, and there are museums here in Georgia that are still showing Top Gun Maverick on private screens in the museum. And I think that's actually relevant to this conversation, because there are so many boutique venues that are not movie theaters where you could show your film, like museums or educational institutions or schools, or, you know, places where that film's specific audience might gather to hold or enjoy a screening. Our film was involved. To make the movie, we had to have the involvement of so many local businesses where we live in Georgia, in Peachtree City, Georgia specifically. So many different businesses were involved, and we actually have such a good relationship with even like the Visitors Bureau here, because we've made video for them, that it would actually make really a lot of sense for us to have some sort of a private local screening, because the relationships surrounding the production of the movie span so many entities in our city that it would actually be really easy, I think, to grassroots market a screening for our film once it's done. So that's something to consider, is like, who are your people, and would it play well at a school or at a university or at a museum or at a town hall or whatever? Like, could you hold a screening in a grassroots kind of way? And if you haven't budgeted, let's say you're already into it and you haven't budgeted marketing money, that might be a really good way to budget some marketing money, is you just I had a friend who made a short film. He four-walled a theater for a short film. He premiered it, and I think he made $2,000, and that was all the money he needed to put that short film through festivals, which was brilliant. He did a great job on that, and that movie ran a lot of festivals, and it was a short. And if he could do that with a short, and I was there, I went to that screening, Anna and I both went. It was packed.
Which one?
Barrett Bergen's The Next Door.
Oh.
It was a packed screening. It was a brand new theater built out in the middle of Orem in a field. Orem, Utah. And so he filled up a theater. This was a kid who was in his first year of film school. We've interviewed him on this podcast. He actually finished his first feature and just got distribution and sold it. And he's selling it to multiple territories through a sales agent right now. He's having great success. So if he can do that with a short film, then you can do it with a feature. People are actually wanting to sit down for a couple hours of entertainment, or even 75 minutes of entertainment if that's how long your feature is. So
especially if they know you and know you've been working on it for years and they want to see what have you been up to this whole time.
Or even 3 months. Let's say you made a real cheap, quick, fast, dirty feature,
or they're involved in it in some way, like you said. So
if we screened our film here with just all the people involved, we could almost fill up a theater. So just how many favors we called in. Everyone's curious about it. So hopefully this has stimulated some ideas for you. And also, whether you are still writing your movie or whether you're about to distribute it or sell it or whatever, I hope that this has given you some realistic expectations and hasn't been discouraging but encouraging for new ways to look at getting your movie to people. And the more people it gets to, the more people it can help, right? Because we make movies to share perspectives and to help ourselves. And the more successful our careers are, the more we can help our collaborators' careers. And so it's all good. We're trying to create goodness in this industry. And we hope that this podcast episode has done that in the form of dissemination of knowledge, right? So
just more ideas and possibilities to open up your mind too.
So those are some of the things.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, some of the things on our minds. So thanks for joining us.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Feature Filmmaker Academy, a program designed to teach anyone how to finance and finish a feature film.
There are many resources teaching you how to do a great job, but what they don't teach you is how to get the job in the first place.
You cannot have a career making feature films until you've made at least one. Anyone can make a feature film using our proven model.
It's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish a feature film or we'll give you your money back.
Learn more at invisiblemansion.com/feature filmmaker or click the link in the show notes.
If you find this free resource valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review or share it with another filmmaker. We'll see you next time. Bye.